The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and cold air. I was signing surgical consent forms with one hand and holding my phone with the other. "Mom, it's just one night," I said quietly. "I'll be under anesthesia." On the other end, I heard laughter in the background, music, my sister's voice. "We can't," my mother replied. "We have tickets." "For what?" I whispered. "To see Taylor Swift." "Don't start drama. You're always a nuisance." A nuisance. I looked at my twins sleeping in the hospital waiting area, curled together under a thin blanket. Have you ever realized your emergency doesn't qualify as urgent to the people you've always helped? That was the moment I stopped asking. For years, I had been the dependable one. When my father's business slowed down, I covered their electricity bill. When my mother wanted to renovate the kitchen, I transferred the deposit quietly. When my sister needed tuition help or a little extra for something social, I never asked too many questions. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family. After my divorce, when I was left raising twins alone, they promised they would be there. "We'll help with the kids," my mother had said. "You won't be alone." At first they did. Occasionally, an afternoon here, a short weekend there, but slowly the help became conditional. "Not this week. We already made plans. Ask your ex." The pattern was subtle enough that I ignored it. Have you ever convinced yourself something isn't neglect because you're afraid to name it? By the time my surgery was scheduled, I didn't hesitate to call them. It wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't optional. My doctor had been firm. "Sooner rather than later," he said. The twins were 6, too young to stay alone, too old to not understand fear. I explained it gently to them. "Mommy has to fix something inside," I told them. "I'll be back before you know it." They nodded bravely. I thought my parents would too. Instead, my mother sighed into the phone. "You always create chaos," she said. "Why can't this wait?" "It can't," I replied quietly. "We've had these tickets for months." Months! I stared at the hospital ceiling. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. "I've been paying your mortgage for 14 months, I said softly. Silence. "That's different," she answered. "Different how? Have you ever realized generosity becomes invisible once it's expected?" "I just need one night," I repeated. She lowered her voice. "Your sister is excited. Don't ruin it." Ruin it. My surgery was ruinous. My pain was inconvenient. My children were optional. I looked at my twins again, their small shoes lined neatly beside the chairs. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, clarity. If I was a burden in crisis, then I needed to stop being a solution in comfort. "I understand," I said calmly. My mother paused, probably expecting an argument. Instead, I opened a new contact on my phone. A professional nanny service I had once saved but never used. And for the first time, I stopped negotiating my worth with my own family. The nanny arrived within 40 minutes. Her name was Elise. Calm voice, warm eyes. She carried a small backpack filled with coloring books and snacks, like she had stepped out of a catalog for prepared people. I explained everything quickly in the hospital hallway. "Just overnight," I said. "I'll be out by morning." She nodded. "I've handled post-surgery support before. Focus on yourself." Focus on yourself. Those words felt foreign. Have you ever noticed how strange it feels when someone prioritizes you without negotiation? I signed the agreement digitally. The hourly rate was high. Overnight care cost more, but there was no guilt in her tone, no hesitation, just professionalism. When I returned to the waiting area, my twins were sitting quietly, watching a cartoon on my phone. "Is Grandma coming?" my son asked. I crouched down slowly. "No," I said gently. "Miss Elise is staying with you tonight." "Why?" my daughter whispered. "Because Grandma had concert tickets. Because I was inconvenient. Because priorities are revealing." But I didn't say that. "They're busy," I answered softly. Their faces fell, but they nodded. Children adapt quickly when they've learned not to expect too much. That realization stung more than the IV needle in my arm. Before they wheeled me towards surgery, I sent one final message to my parents. "Nanny arranged. Kids are safe. Surgery starting soon." My mother replied immediately. "Good. Don't overreact about tonight." Overreact. I stared at the message as the nurse adjusted my blanket. Overreacting would have been yelling, crying, begging. Instead, I paid for help. Paid the way I had always paid. Have you ever realized that independence becomes threatening when it replaces dependence? As the anesthesia mask lowered toward my face, my thoughts weren't about fear. They were about arithmetic, mortgage payments, a car insurance for my father, tuition installments for my sister, monthly grocery transfers I had labeled support. I had never tallied it, until now. When I woke up hours later, the room was dim. The nurse smiled gently. Everything went well. My throat felt dry, my body heavy. I reached for my phone. 3 missed calls, all from my mother. No message, just calls. I didn't return them immediately. Instead, I opened my banking app. For the first time, I looked at the recurring transfers objectively, not emotionally, objectively. The monthly mortgage auto draft, the tuition standing order, the discretionary transfers labeled family help. I didn't feel rage. I felt something more powerful. Distance. Have you ever noticed that once clarity sets in, guilt loses its grip? The next morning, Elise sent photos of the twins eating pancakes at my kitchen table. "They slept fine," she wrote. "Your daughter asked if you were brave." I swallowed. "Tell her yes," I replied, because bravery sometimes looks like boundaries. Later that afternoon, my mother finally left a voicemail. "You're being dramatic. We would have helped if it were truly serious." Truly serious. I stared at the ceiling. Major surgery wasn't serious, but a pop concert was. Something in me closed quietly, not loudly, not violently, just decisively. I opened my laptop from the hospital bed, and one by one I paused every recurring transfer. The mortgage draft, paused. The tuition installment, paused. The discretionary support, deleted. No announcement, no warning, just correction. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't punishing them. I was recalibrating. Have you ever realized that support given without respect is simply exploitation in softer packaging? When I got discharged 2 days later, my parents were waiting outside the hospital entrance, not with flowers, with questions. "Why did the mortgage bounce?" my father asked immediately. I adjusted the blanket over my lap. "Because I was in surgery," I replied calmly. My mother crossed her arms. "This is petty." "No," I said gently. "This is proportionate." They stared at me like they didn't recognize the person sitting in that wheelchair. Maybe they didn't, because the woman who apologized for asking had been replaced by someone who no longer negotiated her emergency. They followed me to my car like creditors. No hug, no "how are you feeling?" Just numbers. "The mortgage was due yesterday," my father said, keeping his voice low but urgent. "The bank called." I adjusted the seat slowly. My abdomen ached with every small movement. "I know," I replied. My mother leaned closer to the open door. "You can't just shut things off like that. We rely on you." There it was. Rely. I met her eyes. "I relied on you too," I said quietly. Silence. Have you ever watched someone realize the comparison isn't in their favor? "This is different," she insisted. "That was one night." "Yes," I said, "one night I needed you." My brother stepped forward from behind them, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. "You're overreacting," he muttered. I almost smiled. Overreacting had become their favorite word. I closed the car door gently. "I'm recovering," I said through the cracked window. "We can talk later." I drove away slowly, careful with every turn. Back home, Elise had already tidied the kitchen. The twins ran toward me carefully, as if I were fragile glass. "You're brave," my daughter whispered. I hugged them gently, wincing through the pain. Later that evening, my phone lit up again. Group message. "Mom, this isn't fair." "Dad, we've supported you emotionally for years." Supported. The word felt hollow. Have you ever noticed how emotional support is mentioned only when financial support disappears? I typed one sentence. I needed you once. You chose a concert. Then I muted the thread. No dramatic speech, no public confrontation, just a line drawn quietly, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about it. Recovery is slower when you're alone, not physically, emotionally. The house felt different after surgery, quieter, smaller, more honest. The twins were careful around me, whispering instead of shouting, bringing me water in cups that were slightly too full. Elise came twice more that week, just for a few hours at a time. I paid her gladly. No tension, no emotional invoice. Have you ever realized how peaceful help feels when it isn't layered with obligation? My parents didn't visit, not once, but they texted. Mortgage still unpaid. Tuition deadline approaching. Call us. No mention of my stitches. No, are you healing? Just reminders. I answered selectively. I'm focusing on recovery. My mother called late one evening anyway. You're punishing us, she said. I was sitting at the kitchen table holding a heating pad against my abdomen. The twins were asleep. I'm reprioritizing, I replied. You've changed, she added. The accusation used to work on me. Changed meant ungrateful. Changed meant distant. Changed meant disloyal. Now it sounded like growth. Have you ever noticed how independence is labeled as rebellion when it disrupts a system? I needed you once, I said calmly. You declined. We had plans, she replied, as if that explained everything. So did I answered softly. Mine involved anesthesia. Silence stretched across the line. You're making this bigger than it is, she said finally. No, they were shrinking it to avoid responsibility. After that call, something in me settled permanently, not anger, distance. The following week, my father sent me a spreadsheet, projected expenses, upcoming payments. A highlighted column labeled, Your Contribution. I stared at it for a long time. Contribution, as if I were an employee who had stopped clocking in. Have you ever realized you've been drafted into a role you never formally accepted? I closed the file without replying. Instead, I opened my own spreadsheet. Savings, emergency fund, education accounts for my twins, medical recovery budget. For the first time, the numbers felt clean, not divided. Mine. That weekend, my sister posted photos from the concert. Sparkling outfits, stadium lights, captions about best night ever. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt clarity. They hadn't chosen wrong. They had chosen honestly. Entertainment over emergency, excitement over obligation. And now I was choosing honestly too. My focus was narrow. Recovery, my children, stability. 3 weeks passed quietly. No transfers resumed, no apologies offered. Then one afternoon, as I was helping my twins with homework, there was a knock at the door. Firm, unexpected. Not the light tap of a delivery, not the polite ring of a neighbor, a knock that carried weight. Have you ever felt a moment before you opened the door, knowing something had shifted again? I stood slowly, my body still tender, and walked toward it. And for the first time, I didn't feel anxious. I felt prepared. The knock came again. Steady. Measured. I opened the door slowly. My parents stood on the porch. No smiles, no rehearsed warmth, just urgency. My father held an envelope. My mother's lips were pressed tightly together. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside, not out of obligation, out of control. They walked into the living room carefully, as if entering a space they weren't entirely welcome in. The twins peeked from the hallway. Go finish your homework, I said gently. They disappeared quietly. My father placed the envelope on the coffee table. The bank is threatening foreclosure, he said. There it was. Not pride, not image, consequence. You stopped the payments without warning, my mother added. I sat down slowly across from them. I was in surgery, I replied. That's not the point, she snapped, then softened her tone. We relied on you. Relied. The word had become heavy with repetition. Have you ever noticed how reliance feels different when it's expected instead of appreciated? I relied on you too, I said evenly, for one night. My father rubbed his temples. This isn't about that anymore. No, it was exactly about that. You cut us off completely, my mother continued. We're struggling. Struggling. A word I had heard often when it applied to everyone but me. And I wasn't? I asked gently. They didn't answer. Instead, my father slid the envelope toward me. Inside were overdue notices, loan reminders, credit card balances. My brother's name appeared on more than one document. You were covering more than we told you, my father admitted quietly. I looked up. How much more? He exhaled. Your brother's debt, some of it. So the mortgage wasn't just a mortgage. It was a bridge over someone else's recklessness. Have you ever discovered you were financing silence? You should have told me, I said calmly. You would have stopped, my mother replied. Yes, I would have. And that was the real issue. My sister wasn't with them. She didn't come? I asked. She's figuring things out, my father said vaguely. Of course she was. She had never had to before. My mother leaned forward slightly. We need help, she said plainly, just until we stabilize. Stabilize. The word sounded so reasonable, so familiar, so practiced. I studied their faces. For years, I would have reached for my phone automatically, opened the banking app, calculated how much I could transfer without harming myself too badly. This time, I didn't move. I won't resume payments, I said calmly. My mother stiffened. You're abandoning us. No, I was detaching from dependency. I'm choosing my children, I replied, and my recovery. My father looked tired. We didn't realize how much we leaned on you. That was the first honest sentence of the evening. Leaning, not supporting. Leaning. Have you ever felt the weight lift the moment someone names the imbalance? The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It was fragile, and for the first time, they weren't asking from authority. They were asking from exposure. They didn't argue when I said no. That surprised me. For years, resistance would have triggered escalation. Tears, accusations, emotional rewrites of history. This time, they just looked uncertain. My father stared at the overdue notice in his hands as if it belonged to someone else. We thought you'd always be there, he admitted. Always. Not sometimes, not when convenient, always. Have you ever realized that always is a dangerous expectation when it's one-sided? I was there, I said quietly, until I needed you. My mother opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The twins' laughter floated faintly from the hallway. Soft. Ordinary. My parents heard it too. They glanced toward the sound. For a moment, I saw something flicker across my mother's face. Not anger, recognition. These are your priorities now, she said slowly. Yes, I replied. No defense, no explanation, just yes. My father folded the notices carefully and placed them back in the envelope. We'll figure something out, he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't triumphant. It was responsible. Have you ever watched someone encounter consequences without a safety net for the first time? They stood to leave. At the door, my mother paused. You didn't have to cut everything off so suddenly, she said. I did, I answered gently. If I didn't, nothing would have changed. That was the truth. Gradual boundaries would have been negotiated. Temporary pauses would have been interpreted as leverage, but full clarity leaves no room for reinterpretation. They stepped outside. The air felt still. As my father walked toward the car, he turned back briefly. We never meant to make you feel like a burden, he said. I held his gaze. You didn't mean to, I replied, but you did. There was no accusation in my tone, just fact. He nodded once. They drove away slowly. The house fell quiet again. I leaned against the door for a moment and let myself breathe. Not relief, not regret, alignment. For years, I had tried to balance two roles, daughter and provider. One of them had consumed the other. Now the lines were clean. I walked back into the living room. My twins were building something out of blocks. "Who was it?" my son asked. "Grandma and Grandpa," I said. "Are they mad?" my daughter whispered. I crouched carefully beside them. "No," I said honestly, "they're learning. Learning that support isn't guaranteed. Learning that boundaries aren't cruelty. Learning that access ends where respect ends. Have you ever realized that sometimes the healthiest thing you can give someone is the space to grow without you carrying them? That night, I reviewed my finances again. Stable, predictable, mine. For the first time since my divorce, I didn't feel like I was stretching myself thin to keep everyone comfortable. I felt steady. 3 weeks earlier, I had been lying in a hospital bed labeled a nuisance. Now, I was standing in my own living room, holding my own ground. And the difference wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. 3 days after they left, the knock came again. Softer this time, not urgent. I opened the door slowly. My sister stood there alone. No dramatic entrance, no defensive posture, just her. "I need to say something," she began. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. She stayed standing near the doorway, like she wasn't sure how long she was allowed to stay. "I didn't know how much you were covering," she said quietly. "Mom and Dad told me you were just helping a little." "A little?" I almost smiled. "It wasn't little," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I figured that out." Silence settled between us. Not hostile, just exposed. Have you ever watched someone realize they benefited from a system they never questioned? "I should have watched the kids," she added, "at least that night." "Yes," I said. No lecture, no raised voice, just yes. She swallowed. "I thought you'd always fix things." There it was again. Always. "I won't anymore," I said gently, not as punishment, as truth. She nodded. "I guess we all need to figure things out now." "Yes," I said again. This time it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. After she left, I stood at the window for a moment, watching her walk to her car. No anger, no victory, just transition. Later that week, my father called. "We're restructuring the mortgage," he said, "selling the extra car." It wasn't an update meant to guilt me. It was information. Responsibility had shifted back to where it belonged. My mother sent a short message that evening. "I hope you're healing well." No demand attached, just that. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Have you ever noticed how boundaries don't destroy relationships? They redefine them? The twins were playing on the floor when I set my phone down. "Are we okay?" my son asked randomly, stacking blocks carefully. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Because being okay no longer depended on being needed by everyone else. It depended on being steady for them. 3 weeks earlier, I had been called a nuisance from a hospital bed. Now I was simply a mother, a woman, a daughter who no longer financed silence. If this story resonates with you, like the video and share your thoughts below. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped carrying it alone.
What would you have done in my place? Comment below.